Hi, everybody. I'm very happy to be here with Heidi again, who's joined us before for an author chat. And you're going to start us off by telling us a bit about yourself and your books.
Hi, everyone. Nice to see you again. My name is Heidi, Heidi Amsinck. I am Danish, but I've lived more of my life in the UK than I have lived in Denmark. Came over as a 24-year-old newspaper journalist, started working in London. I have written really all my adult life, but I have mainly been writing short stories for Radio 4, BBC Radio 4. I think I've done over sort of 20 or so short stories over the years, and I published a collection of those stories in 2018. And then as lockdown happened in 2020, I kind of sat down and finished a project I'd been working on for a while, which was a crime novel. That novel came out in September 21, and it's called My Name is Jensen. And it's really the introduction to a series of crime novels that take place in Copenhagen with female reporters, the main protagonist. And so all the books are meant to be able to, you're meant to be able to read them as a standalone, but they do have the same principal cast running through them. So quite a few people will pop up again through the series. I say this as I'm writing number 3 right now. So it sort of continues with the same cast. So that's me.
I was a really big fan of My Name is Jensen. And there's a really great character who's like the coffee stall guy. Does he reappear in all of them?
Yes, he does. Yeah, Liron, yes, who's from Jerusalem and is trying to teach the Danish people about coffee. And he's a kind of a friend, and he's also somewhat an outsider in Copenhagen, like Jensen, who's come back after being away for 15 years. So I really want with these books to show you my Copenhagen, where I was born. I want to kind of take people around, but it's easier to do that through the eyes of someone who wasn't born there and doesn't think everything is just normal. And so Jensen notices a lot of things, and she tends to gravitate towards people who also aren't kind of from Copenhagen. So she's got a sort of motley crew of various people who help her investigate crimes.
Does she ever travel outside of Copenhagen in the books? Because there's a lot of beautiful places in Denmark.
Yes, that's very true. Country of 5 million, and Copenhagen is by far the largest city. But she does in book 2. She leaves Copenhagen, and she sort of goes back to her past. She goes back to where she spent some of her youth after she left Copenhagen, which is on the far north coast of Denmark, which is a place I know very well as well. So we get to hear a little bit more about her background, and we meet her mother, who was an artist working in North Jutland. But still, the main action is happening in Copenhagen, which is really the kind of center of my imagination, I suppose. So all the roads will always lead back to Copenhagen eventually, but we do take trips out.
So Tam's asked a question that I was kind of formulating in my mind. She's saying, do you know the area of Copenhagen you've written about well? Obviously, you're from Denmark, but having lived away from so long, how much did you have to go back and do research as well?
I do know Copenhagen really well, but I kept sort of giving streets the wrong names and things like that. So I do have to look up Google Maps now and again just to remind myself what the streets are called. But I know the feeling of Copenhagen really, really well, and getting from A to B in Copenhagen, and the quickest route between points and that sort of thing is something you never forget. I've spent many years there, and I worked there as a journalist before I came to the UK. So book 1 takes place in Maestre, which is one of the oldest and most picturesque streets in Copenhagen. It's part of the medieval city. It's been there a very, very long time. And that's where the series kicks off. Book 2, we go to more to the suburbs of Copenhagen. We go to sort of various different places where some seemingly unconnected crimes still have a common denominator, that Jensen's friend, former lover, DI Henrik Jongersen, spends a lot of time investigating.
So do you go back as trips every now and again just to...
Yeah, it's very difficult to keep me out of Copenhagen. I go a lot. It's a bit like traveling to Edinburgh or Dublin, maybe from the UK. It's the same kind of flight time. And, very easy. I don't know if anyone on the call has been, but it's about sort of 15-minute metro ride from the airport, and you're right in the middle of Copenhagen, central Copenhagen. So it's an incredibly easy city to visit. Luckily, still have family there and friends, so I can stay, in their flats. And one of the flats that we're in the second book, Jensen ends up in a flat in Christianshavn, which is an area I know very well. I have a friend there, and I often stay there when I'm at home in Copenhagen. So I go there a lot. I go there to be inspired. I take notes. I go and check whether my recollection of an area is still the way it used to be, also because Copenhagen has been built up so much. Some of the outlying areas are now really cool, lots of new apartments, city beaches, all that sort of thing wasn't there when I lived there, which is quite a long time ago. So I do have to go and see what the modern city looks like. And then I speak to friends. I get friends who live in Copenhagen to read my books, to tell me, where I'm going wrong. I do make mistakes, and they kind of put me right. Or they say, in the first book, I had originally put that Jensen could kind of pick and choose between apartments in Copenhagen. And my friend said, nope, you can't, because it's like hen's teeth trying to find a rental flat in Copenhagen at the moment. There's a huge demand. So that kind of insider knowledge, I got from my friends, and crime writing colleagues as well.
And the first one, there's a beautiful map. So I have been to Copenhagen, but even if you have, it's like really lovely to see the map and kind of picture where everywhere is. Is that a thing that's going to come back in other?
Yes, and in fact, my eldest son, has actually drawn those maps. And next time you will, in book 2, which is coming out in 2 weeks, you get a map of all of Denmark, so you can see where Jensen is traveling to. And you also have a map of a slightly larger area of Copenhagen, as we're going to kind of the outlying areas. So yes, and that will continue to happen. The third book is happening all around the harbour area. Copenhagen's very historical harbour, very interesting place. So you'll get a map of the harbour area next time. So I like to do that also as a reminder to myself, but to show people, where are these things that I'm talking about? How far apart are they, and so on. Also because location plays a role in the investigation in terms of proximity of bodies turning up and so on. So it's good to have it on the map.
So what can you tell us about book 2?
So book 2 starts when Henrik Jongersen, Jensen's friend, discovers, or he's on the scene of a crime where an old woman is found murdered in a sort of very affluent suburb of Copenhagen. And it kind of looks a bit like a burglary. It looks like somebody was surprised. She's been hit over the head in some anger. And it kind of, that is the kind of theory that people are going with. And he starts talking to his colleagues about sort of an extraordinary wave of violence really towards elderly people in Copenhagen. There's already been another attack a couple of weeks before. And he starts to sort of take an interest in that, and eventually goes to one of the other scenes of crime and finds a photo of a girl. And that's really what starts off our mystery. This girl turns up on other scenes of crimes, and we're trying to understand who she is, why is she there? And then eventually we find out who this girl is, what's happened to her, and that's when the kind of pieces start to come together. But at the same time, Henrik is kind of going through a long dark night of the soul. He ends book one having got a little bit too close to Jensen for his wife's liking, so he's been thrown out, and she says, I'm done, I can live without you. And so he's spending much of book two trying to get back into her good books, and he sort of goes on a sort of little bit of a journey to try and understand himself, and goes and has sort of sessions with a psychologist. So in book two, it's really about he's trying to stay out of Jensen's way so that they don't have any contact with each other anymore, and that doesn't go so well. But that's kind of his game. He's trying to stay away from this woman who was in his eyes, he's a slightly warped character, but in his eyes is kind of she's always there as a temptation, and he's drawn to her really, really strongly. But he is married and has 3 children, and he can't live that life.
So Laura and Lindsay have said hello to us, and Laura said she really enjoyed the first book.
Thank you so much, Laura. I'm really glad you liked it. It's interesting as the writer, because this was my first novel ever. I feel that I'm learning as I'm going on, and I hope book two delivers a little bit more. One comment that sort of kept coming back was that I left, people's backgrounds. I didn't delve into them. I tend to sort of go quite quickly into the story. And I've spent a little bit more time unpacking who Jensen really is, and why is she using a surname? Why doesn't she use her first name? And we get a little bit more about that in this book. So, yeah. And yes, I can see Laura's asking if Gustav, who is Jensen's sidekick, basically he's the nephew of the newspaper editor, and he's been thrown out of school. And it's sort of, the editor doesn't know what to do with him, and she gives him to Jensen as an apprentice and says, you can teach him to be a reporter. And yes, he's very much still in book two, and there's a kind of mystery, I guess, hanging over why he was thrown out of school. And that mystery gets resolved in book two, and you get to understand Gustav a little bit more. But he also features in book three. He's going to hang around because I quite like him. I have kids, boys around. I have had boys around that age, and I love teenage boys and the way they think completely differently to us, and the way they also get a little bit of a bad press. People see them and assume that they're up to no good. And Gustav kind of plays on that. He's got 2 personas. He's got the angelic sort of child whom people want to help, but he's also got the other side, the rascal. And I think, I've enjoyed always having my sons when they had parties at home and brought home all their friends and so on. I just love that age. I think they're very, very funny and irreverent, and that's something that plays well with Jensen's character, I think. And it's just a bit of light relief, and it also allows Jensen to talk about the profession, the craft, which is also my profession, the trade of journalism. So
you got another fan here in Lindsay. She loved the first book, and the second one arrived at the weekend for the book tour.
Oh, exciting! Oh, I'm so glad that it's arrived. I only just received the books a couple of days ago, and the joy of holding this thing in your hand, and I can see Samantha, I can see, is talking about the covers, and I couldn't agree more. They're designed by a very, very great artist called Jamie Keenan. He does sort of cover designs. Sort of look him up, and I just think he's just great. I mean, they don't arrive, out of the box the way that everyone wants them, but he's incredibly good at teasing out the kind of personality of the story. And I loved the snow that turns into blood. I just thought that was really, really good. And they brought out the book in Denmark, and they used the same front page, whereas in book two, they've started to, go off in a slightly different direction as the crime writing market crime novels look slightly different in Denmark. But I love the kind of the figure, the silhouetted figure of a woman kind of standing in the scene, this slightly anonymous person who calls herself Jensen. I think he catches that really well. So yes, I'm absolutely over the moon. I couldn't be happier. I've written to him so many times. I'm sure he's tired of hearing from me. Oh no, there's this woman again talking about the covers, but I'm very happy with them. Yeah.
Aga asked if your friends read in English or Danish.
They, luckily for me, in Denmark, the people read quite well in English, and in fact, the English paperbacks are sold a lot over there because people read English. So, yes, when I share my manuscripts with people back home, they'll read them in English. Book 2 is being translated at the moment. I think it's probably done. It's coming out in Denmark in a few months. So there isn't a Danish manuscript when I start. That sort of happens later and is done by someone else. I am ashamed to admit, not because I couldn't do it, but because the original story is in English, and it would mean me having to sort of sit and translate that into another mentality, another language. And I've decided that it's better done by a professional translator than me. It would take me a long time, and during that time, I wouldn't have time to write any more books. So, and I have a great relationship with the translators. They're wonderful, and I stay out of their way because they're so professional. But I can read and write in Danish, obviously. So, yeah.
Do you want to tell everyone where in the world you are? So we've interrupted you today.
I'm slightly ashamed. I'm slightly ashamed to say that I'm on the beautiful island of St. Lucia, and I'm here with my partner. Our first we have a sort of complicated, his kids, my kids, and so on. And this is our first holiday on our own together, after lockdown. And and I write here every day. I write really well here. So yes, I kind of hate myself. I've been very ashamed to say to people at work where I was going. But I'm very disciplined about my holiday time because I'm a full-time worker. So when I'm on holiday, I write every day, and I have a target, a word target I must make every day. I use an app or a writing tool called Scrivener, which helps me to plan and kind of lay out my books, and that has a sort of daily taskmaster. And I must meet that. So I go up here, and if it takes me 3 hours, that's 3 hours out of the holiday. If I can do it in less, then. But that's how I always play my holidays. Are always about writing and getting a lot of words down on paper. So, and I'm at the first draft stage, so it's all about kind of just keep going. The point of the first draft is basically it has to exist. That subsequent drafts will hone and shape and form and so on.
So this is the first draft of book 3?
Yes. This is the first draft of book 3. So I spend a lot of time editing because I'm not a genuine bilingual person. So I am working in my second language, even though it's by choice. I still have to work on it. And also I'm undisciplined when I write my first draft. It just sort of comes out to a plan, but it's not perfect. And so I go back and editing. I spend a lot of time in editing, and will often take out a lot of words in editing. So I like to keep things a little bit, not too much flesh. And not too much fat on the kind of on the thing, and just kind of trim it down when I edit, and then also just going over. Sometimes I get expressions completely wrong, or I'll write something that's really Danish translated directly to English and it doesn't work. So that kind of thing I spend a lot of time on. I spend a lot of time with Thesaurus. It's my favorite tool because English is so word rich, and there's often a perfect word in there. So and it might not sort of pop straight into my mind. So that's how I work, really. See, we have a Facebook user, an anonymous guest, asking a question about my day job. I work, I basically run a content team in a bank, which is completely different to being an author. I basically do kind of corporate journalism, if you can call it that. I do a lot of writing, a lot of social media, and so on. And then, which is pretty tough. It's a sort of 12-hour a day job. And so I come home and I always work on weekends. I always work on my book on weekends. And that's why I'm very disciplined with the old writing target. But I have found over many years that I work better when I'm busy and when I'm not looking too directly at what I'm writing, but to sort of let it come and put away the inner critic. So being tired and not having enough time is a great setup for actually getting stuff done. You probably know that saying about giving something you want done to a busy person. It's a little bit that's how my psychology works. I can be incredibly lazy. I think if I had sort of 8 hours clean every day to sit and write, it probably wouldn't do me any good. And I like people. I've got a name for our anonymous Facebook guest, Leslie. Hi, Leslie. So yeah, that's basically me. I quite like working with people. I like listening to dialogue. I work with a lot of young people, and I love their kind of different perspective on things and the way they talk and their expressions and the way they think. And I wouldn't get that if I sat on my own every day. I probably also wouldn't be able to pay my mortgage, but that's another thing. Yeah.
So I had another question, but I'm going to ask you Sam's one, which is when you sat down to write your debut, how did you begin?
Such a good question. I can't even remember. It would have been about 4 years ago or something, and I would have started to. Yes, I remember now. I wanted to write some short stories with a female detective, and I just couldn't make it work at all. So radio stories are about 2,100 words for a 30-minute broadcast, and I just couldn't make a crime plot work in that amount of time when you also had to sort of meet the character and so on. And then as a short story writer, everyone asks you all the time, when are you going to write a novel? Yeah, short story is very interesting. When are you going to write a novel? And so those two things came together. And I suppose, I don't know if you all remember the beginning of lockdown, sort of March 2020, and how weird it was. And I remember, realizing at one point that I'd spent 3 months just on my own, not seeing anyone, just in my own company. And suddenly there was all this time that I might have spent going out with people or commuting. Suddenly I had all this time, and I literally sat down and did that thing, chapter by chapter by chapter, next chapter, don't think about it, don't look back, just keep going. And every time I'd finished a chapter, I'd give it to my son, who was 20 at the time, to read, or 19, just to read. And he'd sort of go, yeah, or no, I don't understand this. And so that was the process, really. And there wasn't a lot to do. We went out for a walk of an hour every day, and that was it. And then kind of cooking and sleeping. And work was strange in the beginning. We had to sort of find our way with it. So I had more time. And so, yeah, I just sat down. I did a plan. So I did write flashcards for every plot development, and I would write whether they were from Jensen's perspective or Henrik's. So before I wrote the book, I had a complete set of flashcards lying out on my dining table showing the book. I'm not someone who can just see where the road takes me. I admire and envy authors who can do that and just sit down and say, oh, I just, just see what turns up, see who turns up. That's not really how it works, except Gustav came suddenly. I felt it was Jensen is a bit of a loner, and it was just too boring to be inside her head all the time. So Jensen sort of came along. People will also, or might remember from the first book, there was a big guy, very, very big guy, Syrian, called Aziz. and he turns up he's in book 3 again. We see more of him, and he also just kind of turned up. So it does happen, but the story arc and each chapter is planned. So that's kind of how I did it.
Is that still how you do it? Have you refined that planning process, or do you still stick with the same?
No, I still, so at the moment, I know what's going to, so book 3, I'm at the stage where I've written a third. I know what's going to happen in the book, and I know the feeling that we're going to be left with at the end. But what I do is I plan ahead, maybe because I write short chapters. I write maybe 80 to 90 chapters in a book, and I will plan ahead. So at the moment, I've got 3 chapters planned ahead of me, but I like having about 10. But don't forget, I know where I'm going to end up, so I know where the story is going to weave. And then, so I always plan ahead. And so when I sit down to write, I know what's going to happen. Sitting down with a blank paper thinking, I don't know what's going to happen now, that doesn't work for me. So I spend quite a lot of time on the planning aspect. But I don't plan every single chapter in the entire book. That's what I did last time. So I think I am maybe changing a little bit in that way. Yeah.
Sam saying the blurbs are really engaging and she needs to read them. I need to pre-order myself book 2. I thought it was coming out sooner than it already was. I was like, I'm sure it comes out this week.
Yeah, no, it's the 28th of July, and it's under a year from the last one. So this number 2 just kind of came and announced, I knew what I wanted to do with that straight away. So that kind of just came. And that was started in lockdown 21. I don't know if you remember, after Christmas, there was then a kind of new period of a few weeks and that's when I started the new project. So I'm slightly behind the curve now. That's why I'm trying to catch up. I'd like to have 2/3 written by the end of September. So that the whole book is finished by the end of the year. So that I can, because, number 4 starts crowding in, and, you want to sort of keep going, and because there's so much that could happen to these characters together or on their own. So, but I will continue to keep the kind of standalone plot set up so that you can read each book on their own. If you've read number 1, you know that there's a underlying longer crime plot that's going on, and that's continuing for the first 3 books, and then we sort of just carry on with standalone. That's just the way it's kind of ended up. So
I'm really relieved, as I'm sure lots of people who are watching are, to know that there's going to be more after, like book 3, even, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I'm the way I read crime novels myself, I suppose, is the way that I also have, want to write them, because I enjoy discovering a new author. And for some reason, I've never read a lot of Anne Cleeves. So now it's just fantastic because she's got a great back catalogue. She's got some great detectives. I've never, Vera and what's his name, Perez. I've never really I've seen on TV, but never really read them. And the writers who then, have more books out. I recently started reading Erin Kelly and C.J. Tudor and Kaz Freer, and those ladies' books I don't know either. So now I've read. I think they're all fantastic, and so then I'm just going through the series. So I love reading other people's work. So I think that's what drives me here, is to continue the story, and also because I'm not really finished with them yet. There's a huge joy that comes from writing. When I sit down, I get so immersed in their lives, and I just want to keep going. I don't want to let them go yet. So I'd miss them terribly, I think. So
what have been your favorite reads of the year so far, then?
I'm trying to think. There's been quite a lot of very good books. I had never read, and I don't know if people here have read her, but Louise Welsh, the Scottish writer, I think she's based in Glasgow. She wrote a book called The Cutting Room, it's quite, I think maybe about 15, 20 years ago. If you can get hold of that, I thought it was absolutely wonderful. So atmospheric. Glasgow is quite dark, and I love the way she uses that darkness. And you've got all these weird characters who kind of come out at night, and it's got a pretty kind of scary, scary plot as well. So, and there's a book out this last year called The Second Cut, which I've still got sort of on my list. I really enjoyed Erin Kelly's Watch Her Fall. It's set in a kind of claustrophobic ballet school environment, and I just loved it. It's full of kind of twists and turns. I thought that was really good. Yeah, I'd say the Cutting Room was the one that really kind of, I suppose, surprised me the most. I've also read a lot of Danish fiction from from my own publishers. Every time I go home, I come back with big bags full of books. So there's so much to read. And the next person on my list from Denmark that I want to read more of is Katrine Engberg, who's very, very good and has written a number of books. And she's bringing out a standalone historical novel this year. Called The Burning Leaf. I hope it'll be translated into English as well. But I think she's a fantastic writer. And of course, Jussi Adler-Olsen. I've read so much of his that I suppose I'm having a little break from him. But I love Department Q. I thought Department Q is. I love the humor in it, and I love the central character and the way he kind of goes to work in a basement. And then just, starts to investigate. Just wonderful. Yeah, and the Icelandic ladies, how can I forget? Eva Eggertsdottir and Lilja Sigurdardottir, those two, and Yrsa as well. I just love Icelandic crime fiction. I just love the darkness, they're so lucky. They have this beautiful, dramatic nature to set their, the crime stories in, and I think that they all do it so well. And I could read them all day long. Actually, really enjoy Iceland crime.
Yeah, I do. Lindsay asks who your favorite author from Denmark is.
So I think of the crime writers, I just don't think anybody's ever reached the height of Jussi. And I know that some people are starting to say that he's sort of lost the form a little bit, but I just think his plotting is absolutely phenomenal. I love his characterization and so on. I just think he's absolutely fantastic. I'm reading a book by a lady called Annemette Kirk. I don't know if I think she has been translated in. There are 3 books in a series, and I think she's very, very good, and I've really enjoyed her book. So Annemette Kirk, who is also a former journalist. There's a lot of journalists who are sort of going into. But my favorite author from Denmark, sorry, I should have said, is Karen Blixen. I think nobody from Denmark of the whole back catalogue of Danish literature has ever had as much impact on me as Karen Blixen has with the Gothic tales and so on. That's kind of where my passion for fiction started. I just love her magical kind of fairy tale darkness. I think it's wonderful. I really highly recommend.
Excellent. I think mine, apart from yourself, is Tove Jansson.
Yes. Tove Jansson, she's fit. Her the summer book and so on. Are you thinking of this? Yeah, the Moomins, and just absolutely totally idiosyncratic. She's completely herself. There's no one like her. Wonderful books, and also to read slightly later in life. I think she's got a lot of wisdom for living as well, which is wonderful.
Sam has asked you, do you get a writer's hangover after each book?
Do you know what? When you've written the first draft, sometimes in the first draft you think, yeah, I'm really enjoying this, and yeah, I think this could work. Then you start editing, and it's like descending into some sort of hell because it's hard, and you don't know really what you're doing. I don't share my fiction with anybody until I've polished it as much as I can. So I don't share. Well, I do with certain people, but I wouldn't send it to my editor until I've worked through it many times. And during that period, I'm afraid you come to hate it slightly. You can no longer read it with fresh eyes. Everything just seems like, oh God. And you start, it's like kind of being a window cleaner, where you stop looking at the view, you start looking at the imperfections in the glass, and you can't see what's beyond it. And that's what editing does to you. So now book 2 is coming out. It's absolutely ages ago since I finished it. So my mind is completely full of book 3 now. But yeah, I guess that was what I was saying before, that if I suddenly stopped writing these books, my life would feel so empty, because I enjoy the project, and I enjoy it's like sort of a second life, isn't it? It's a way of living life through other people, and I think I will go on doing that until I die. I've always said I want to work all my life, and hopefully one day I'll be able to make the transition and just write, and hopefully I'll be doing it on my deathbed, because I do love it so much. I love the story and the constant narrative, and love reading. I love listening to people talking about books. When I first started joining kind of book festivals and so on, it was such a fantastic feeling, meeting authors. Oh my God, I was at a Danish crime festival that's held every year, and it's really, really good. And it was like, there's Jussi over there, and there's Faber, and Katrine Engberg, and Lone Theils is another writer who's very good from Denmark. And all these people I've admired all my life, and then to be part of that community, it's been absolutely amazing. I don't know if you've probably heard this before, but crime writers are incredibly generous to each other and very inclusive, and there's no competitive sort of. I've always just had help from all the people I've turned to. I've just remembered another great read, actually. I don't know if anybody knows Ane Reel. She's married to a jazz drummer, quite famous jazz drummer from Denmark, called Alex Reel, and she wrote a book. It was called it was called Sap in Danish, but I can't remember what it's called in English. I'll find out and I'll let you know. That book is absolutely amazing. That's another of those kind of completely idiosyncratic crime novels. She's a great writer. Really like her. And I wrote to her recently. She's a friend of a friend, and she gave me 2 hours of her time just talking about how she works, so there's a lot of that sharing going on amongst crime writers, which has been so wonderful to be a part of, to be honest.
Sam is also trying to work out, she says, if you only write on holiday, because she's trying to work out how you balance both your jobs.
Yeah, so it's a little bit, so writing the first draft, yes. It happens on holiday, and it happens every Saturday and every Sunday. So I'm absolutely militant. I must make 2,000 words Saturday and Sunday. I will write notes during the week, but I'm too tired. Just have to focus on work. But then when the working week is over, I physically put away my working equipment if I've been working from home, and I work on a Mac when I write, and I put that there, and then I go, and I'm not allowed to do anything fun until I've reached my word target. That's how I run it. And then editing is slightly different. You can edit in the evening after work. I find it's something I can do a little bit more easily when it's not kind of fresh words coming out, but I'm looking at my words. But I have about 6, I'm lucky. I actually this year have 7 weeks holiday, and all of those are spent to a certain extent reaching a writing target, a goal in terms of words. My novels end up being sort of 90,000 words. And so I in Scrivener you can set that, and you can literally see the bar moving slowly across as you finish your draft, and that's how I do it, because I have to be super disciplined, and I have a very understanding partner who understands that it's non-negotiable for me. I must write every day. So yeah. on holiday. It sounds awful, doesn't it? But it's not like that for me. It's not a hardship. It's just really enjoyable. I love it.
What do your colleagues think about your writing?
Oh, they're very supportive. I mean, I had to go through a sort of crazy rigmarole of explaining to them that the book wasn't about the company, and it had nothing to do with my work. But I've always done it, and when I launch my books, they all come along, and people are so lovely. But I have always encouraged all my younger colleagues to have something else than the day job, to have something else going on in their life, an interest, a passion, and spend and really invest time in it, and leave work early so you can do these things. So I'm kind of living like I preach, because I think it's just so important. Also, work can come and go. I might be out of a job, tomorrow, and it's nice to have that there's something else going on in my life. I've always enjoyed that aspect. So yeah, they're very supportive and wonderful, my colleagues. Yeah, they're probably wondering, when is she's going to give in soon. She's going to give in, she's going to stop working. But no, bank manager says no. So
What have you got planned for your book launch this year?
I have a launch. I have a sort of launch reception or party at my favorite bookstore in the world, which is Daunt, at Marylebone High Street in London, which is has got that, if people have been there, that kind of sort of William Morris sort of feel to it, with sort of wood paneling, and there's a sort of gallery above the book store and so on. It's this wonderfully atmospheric bookstore. So we'll go in there. I'll probably Tim McInerney, the actor, has narrates the audiobook, and has also narrated all my stories for radio. And I love him, and I often hear his voice in my head, when I write. And he'll probably come, if I'm very lucky and he's not working, he'll come and maybe do a reading for us from the book. And then just things like this, being lucky enough to be invited to tell people about the book. And I'm going, very, very excited. I'm going to Iceland Noir in November, on the invitation of US, which is very kind. She very kindly gave me a quote for the first book, and she's invited me over there to be on a panel with other Danish writers and so on. So I'll be trying to sort of attend a few events and interviews, and just I'll basically turn up for anything. People's book clubs, and I've done that at work as well, which I think is fun. So yeah.
Would you? What other sort of events have you got planned that are live, if you know what I mean, like in-person events, apart from Iceland Noir? Are you going up to bloody Scotland again? Are you doing any of the other?
I'm actually not going to bloody Scotland. I went last year, but this year they've decided not to have a sort of Nordic noir panel. So I think they've got, I think Lilia is quite close to the festival. She lives in between Glasgow and Iceland. So she's kind of Scottish based, and so I think she'll be there. But I might go up there because I just really, really love it. And then there's the biggest Danish book event is coming up in October, early October. I think it's called Boform in out by the airport. It's a massive event. Last year, everyone got COVID, went there. But that's where the publishers will have their own little kind of stage area where they interview authors through the day and so on. And I'm really, really looking forward to that. And yes, just sort of, as I say, saying yes to absolutely everything that comes my way. I was at Granite Noir last year. It's a festival up in Aberdeen. That was really, really fun. Because the beauty of the festivals is that you just meet so many people. I met Anne Cleves there, and oh my God, it's Anne Cleves. I was too starstruck to talk to her, but and Val McDermid, is very, very approachable at Bloody Scotland. She'll talk to anyone. She's there, and it's quite a small festival, so I really enjoy being there. But I'm not on the panel this year. No.
Fair enough. I think sometimes it's still good to go and mix though, isn't it? Because you do meet all those other authors and
Yeah, yeah, and I remember once many years ago, I did a course with someone called the Arbonne Foundation, which I can really recommend if you're writing yourself and you want some time to do it, and also some tutoring. And Mark Billingham was, as a guest speaker on that course, and he said that's how his crime writing career started. He started going to Harrogate. He started going to Bloody Scotland. He just started hanging out with crime writers, and suddenly he was writing himself, and he really enjoyed that part. And I met him recently at the launch of the Bloody Scotland program, and he repeated it. He said the same thing, that it's just about, networking, get to know others. Everyone's battling with the same things anyway. And he's very, very supportive. And I think it's really, I didn't realize it would be like this. It's been a very, very positive experience to join that writers community. Lovely people, generous with their time. If you ask anyone for a quote, that they'll give you a quote for the book. It's people are wonderful. Yeah.
Well, like Sam has said, that it's a good advice to ensure your day job isn't taking over your whole life. CBC has given her some joy. It is our job doing the author chats. We do affectionately call our second job.
Yeah, you do a lot of work for the. No, I also think it's that kind of community belonging and so on I guess is something I can't really find at work. I think we're a couple of people who write books at work, but it's not a big thing. So if I want to talk to like-minded people, it's basically that second life outside of work.
Yeah. What's on your TBR pile at the moment?
My TBR pile is ridiculously high. I've got the second cut, as I mentioned. I've got Val McDermid's 1979. Has anyone read it? Anyone recommend it? Have anyone started that new series? I've got many Danish books, and I don't know how to translate them. I'm reading Cas Freer. I'm reading her latest novel, and I'm reading C.J. Tudor's The Burning Girls. Oh, Lindsay's saying it's brilliant. Okay. I'm really looking forward to reading 79. I think she's going to do 79, 89, 99, isn't she? She's going to kind of go through the sort of decades. I'm just a very big fan of Val McDermid, so I'm looking forward to reading that. So yeah, huge to be read pile. And I try and read on Audible as well, so that I expand my reading time. And I'm reading Mick Herron at the moment, whom I adore. I think he's just so funny and clever. And I heard that he said he doesn't do much research into his sort of spy novels, because basically no one will stand up and say that something isn't true, because then they'd be called out as a spy. So I just love. I think he's great. I love his writing. Oh my God, over 500 books. Jeez, that is a lot of books in a TBR pile.
I think mine probably would give you a run for your money, Lindsay.
Yeah. Oh my good. How about you?
Mine is easily about the size of Lindsay's, I would say, if not a bit bigger.
And you get sent stuff all the time.
No, not really, actually. We prefer to, where we can, buy our books.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Hundreds, says Sam.
Yeah.
Hundreds.
And because you read for the author chats, but you also buy all the books that you want. That you're going to read books you want to read for the author chats, but you also buy all the other books you want to read as well. And then you read it. So you don't read them straight away.
You don't read them straight. If I go to a festival, like I went to the Danish Crime Writing Festival and met Claire McIntosh from the UK, and I bought her books. I love meeting the author, buying their books, and they'll write something nice in a book. And so I always come home with just too many. But I really do. I mean, a book like Erin Kelly's Watch Her Fall, for instance, is it's a very quick read. It's incredibly enjoyable. It's very difficult to put down. You just want to keep going until you finish the story. So, and I love that. But I must. I have a very small flat, and it's literally just piling up. It's kind of piling up in the windowsill, so I can't see out anymore. Yeah.
You mix reading in English and Danish. You know, if you're in Denmark,
Yes.
buy books in Danish and read them in.
Yeah. I don't tend to write. I would never read a Danish book in English because I'd just be sitting there all the time thinking, what was that in Danish? And I love my reading something in my own language. It's just like that. Nothing can beat it, you know. And we've got some fantastic writers, so there's so much coming out all the time. So yeah. So yeah.
Good.
I can't see if there might have been some questions that I've missed.
No, everyone's just saying that author chats are fatal to the TBR pile. Which
yes, it's true.
And the the worst thing for your bank balance, but the best thing is when you meet an author and you read that book, and sometimes it's like a book that you wouldn't necessarily always have like bought yourself. Yours is absolutely one. I love kind of Scandinavian crime fiction, so I absolutely would have bought your book anyway, and we'll buy all of the others. But like, there's so many other books, and you start reading them, and you're like, oh my god, I have to buy all of this series now.
Yes, exactly. And there's no escape.
No.
But then I don't know whether people read physical books, because I only read on my Kindle for years, and then suddenly, recently,
Oh, I may have lost Heidi. She don't read.
Because it would be so much simpler if I could just sort of read on my Kindle. But I love the cover. I love holding the book in my hand.
Yeah, no, I prefer a physical book. I'm going to be honest.
Yeah.
So we've got a few minutes left, about 8 minutes. Do you want to just give us a reminder about book 2 when it comes out, what the title is, what you can tell us about what happened?
Yeah.
So everyone who's watching who loves your books knows when to buy it.
Okay, so The Girl in the Photo is coming out on the 28th of July, and it is set in central Copenhagen. And it's really, the murder investigation takes place there, and it really centers around these photos of a girl that kind of turn up on different crime scenes, and Henrik is the only one who sort of, you know, thinks that the three murders are related, and his life is kind of imploding at the same time, so no one believes him, and he's starting to get erratic and violent and so on. So he's sort of he's trying this investigation himself, and then of course Jensen comes into it, because the old lady who starts the book, who's found murdered in her villa in an affluent suburb, her daughter has discovered that the lady's diamond necklace is gone, and hires Jensen, whom she's been recommended. She hires Jensen to find the necklace, and that starts Jensen off. But then she becomes curious about the girl in the photo, and that's really the mystery that runs through the book. Who was she? What happened to her? Where is she now? And that's really the story. And you see Gustav again. So Gustav's expulsion from school is being kind of, you know, we go back and hear a little bit more about that and his family relationships. And at the same time, Dagbladet, which is this old leftish newspaper in Denmark, is kind of just sinking. It's not doing very well at all. So at the beginning of book 3, we suddenly have a kind of new owners, and stuff starts to happen. But basically, it's sort of in the dying newspaper industry. And we also, Jensen has rented a very old flat in a part of Copenhagen, which I find particularly atmospheric, which is by the canals, Christianshavn. So we spend a lot of time there, and you know, I can't help myself. So there's a lot of lush description of Copenhagen, you know, things I love, food that I love there, and places that I love to go, because, you know, and it takes place in the springtime, just as you turn kind of from winter into spring, where Copenhagen really comes into its own. If you want to go there, I really recommend going in the summer or late spring. Don't go in the winter; it might spoil your image of the city, because it does get very cold and dark.
But then isn't some of the charm maybe also discovering it when it's very cold and dark?
Yes, yeah, exactly. And of course, book one starts with a sort of or starts in a blizzard. Yeah, you can get everything over there. At the moment, it's incredibly hot. I hear it's also very hot in the UK, but we're having one of those unusual hot summers. Well, going in December is not bad, because in Denmark, Danish people love Christmas, and they go completely mad for Christmas. And so you can go to Tivoli, the fun fair in the middle of Copenhagen. It's all decked out with Christmas decorations and lights. It's just gorgeous. And you go in there and you have all the, the glühwein and all the sort of stuff like, from a Christmas market, but it's also set in a fun fair. It's a wonderful time to visit. I'd say give January and February a miss. But December, when we're just coming up to Christmas, you've got all the beautiful lights and decorations. Copenhagen really is gorgeous. So please go there. It's a wonderful place. I love it. It's very small. You can walk or cycle right across it. So yeah.
And you can go on the boat, like the canals and things as well. That's a nice way.
Yes, and even my mother and I did that together before she passed away, and she's born and bred in Copenhagen and has been there, all her life, and knows it extremely well. And we took a canal boat and really enjoyed it. As I said, Copenhagen Harbour is really interesting. There's so much to see, and taking a harbour trip. And yeah, I've written some short stories about it, because it's just an area I particularly love. And of course, it's where the English came over and bombed Copenhagen as well. So there's a lot of history between our two countries that's kind of centered around the harbour. So.
And then all I have to say is thank you so much for joining us. And
thank you for having me.
Enjoy the rest of your time in St. Lucia.
Thank you. I can't but enjoy it. It's impossible not to be happy here. So thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for your lovely questions. I hope you like the book.
I'm sure they will.
Thank you. Okay, see you soon.